thought about Syria's changing power dynamics for a couple of seconds. In late November 2024, Syria's long-running civil war took an unexpected turn. A coalition of rebel forces launched a massive offensive against the government of Bashar al-Assad, rapidly seizing large areas of territory. Within days, Assad's government, which had held on to power for over a decade, despite immense challenges, collapsed. This sudden upheaval has transformed the political landscape of Syria, upended long-standing alliances, and drawn intense interest from foreign powers seeking to shape the country's future. Before the offensive, a fragmented landscape. From about 2020 until just before the November 2024 offensive, Syria's political map remained largely static. The country was divided among several key players. The Assad government, red on the map, led by President Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian Ba'ath Party. This regime once controlled most of the country. Assad's grip on power, initially weakened during the early years of the civil war, had been reinforced through significant help from Iran and Russia. While Assad's government presented itself as socialist and Arab nationalist, in practice it operated as an authoritarian regime, known for severe repression and political favoritism. His power base was strongest along the Alawite majority coastal regions. Radical Islamist and jihadist groups, light green, Idlib area, concentrated around the city of Idlib. This collection of militant organizations, most prominently Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, sought to govern Syria under Islamic law. HTS formed in 2017 from several radical factions, including former al-Qaeda affiliates, had been trying to present itself as more moderate in recent years, promising to respect minority rights. However, its past ties to groups like al-Qaeda and ISIS cast doubt on its long-term intentions. Turkish-backed rebels, dark green, Syrian National Army. Established in 2017 with Turkish support, the Syrian National Army, SNA, is a mixture of various rebel groups that coordinate closely with Ankara. Their priorities often align with Turkish interests, such as pushing back Kurdish-led forces near the northern border. While they fought both Assad's regime and Kurdish forces, the SNA's loyalty to Turkey remained a defining feature. Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, Yellow, dominated by Kurdish fighters but also including some Arab allies, the SDF controlled large parts of northern and eastern Syria. The SDF received support from the United States and other Western allies, especially in the fight against ISIS, but had also cooperated occasionally with the Assad government and Russia. They sought autonomy and security for Syria's Kurdish population and had a complicated relationship with other factions, including the Turkish-backed rebels who opposed them. Smaller factions. ISIS remnants lingered in remote eastern deserts. The US-backed new Syrian army controlled an area near the Iraqi border, where American forces maintained a military presence. Southern rebels had once battled Assad, but later reached uneasy truces, maintaining pockets of influence in the south. The November 2024 offensive and collapse of the regime. The rebel offensive did not come out of nowhere. Years of stalled negotiations from 2020 to 2024 failed to produce a political settlement. Meanwhile, Assad's foreign backers were distracted. Russia was heavily focused on its ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Iran had turned its attention to the wars involving Israel in Gaza and Lebanon. With their main supporters preoccupied, Assad's forces were vulnerable. The rebel coalition, bolstered by Turkish aid, launched a coordinated surprise attack in late November 2024. Government troops quickly retreated from the northwest, allowing the rebels to capture key cities like Aleppo and Hama. As morale in the Syrian army collapsed, defections became widespread. Encouraged by these rapid gains, previously dormant rebel groups in the south, calling themselves the Southern Operations Room, rose up once more and advanced towards Damascus. At the same time, HTS seized Homs, and the SDF moved into territories along the Euphrates as government forces withdrew. The US-backed new Syrian army pushed from the east, capturing Palmyra and advancing on Damascus. Within just 11 days, all areas under regime control had fallen, and local militias took over where larger factions had not yet arrived. The once dominant Assad regime, in power for half a century, disintegrated almost overnight. Assad's whereabouts remained unknown. Regional winners, losers, and uncertainties. With Assad gone, the entire regional equation has changed. Turkey, having long supported the opposition, emerges as a major power broker. By helping the rebels overthrow Assad, it fulfills key objectives and now enjoys substantial influence in Syria. However, Turkey's struggle with Kurdish forces in northern Syria is far from over, and it may attempt a more direct intervention to reduce Kurdish autonomy. The United States welcomes the end of Assad's rule and the diminished roles of Russia and Iran. Yet Washington faces a new challenge. Some rebel factions, especially HTS, are too radical for the US's comfort. The Americans must now balance their interests against the risk of extremists gaining more power in Syria. Israel, long opposed to Assad due to his alliance with Iran, finds itself in a complicated position. On one hand, the removal of Assad reduces Iranian influence next door. On the other, a potentially unstable, jihadist-influenced Syria could pose its own security threats, especially regarding the Golan Heights, a region occupied by Israel but internationally recognized as Syrian territory. Russia and Iran, once key backers of Assad, are in a precarious situation. Russia may lose its precious naval and air bases on the Syrian coast, vital for its Mediterranean strategy. Iran's corridor to its ally Hezbollah in Lebanon is severed. Both countries are trying to salvage something, with Iran reportedly negotiating with the new factions to protect Shiite communities and holy sites in exchange for political recognition. A new chapter for Syria. With Assad gone, many Syrians feel a sense of relief after years of brutal war and repression. The swift collapse of the regime occurred with surprisingly little bloodshed at the final stage, offering a glimmer of hope for a more peaceful future. Ideally, a transitional government or council could emerge, bringing all major factions to the table to negotiate a lasting political settlement and ensure autonomy and safety for minority groups. However, these hopes are balanced against harsh realities. The common goal of removing Assad has vanished, leaving a patchwork of factions with differing visions for Syria's future. Without sustained diplomacy and compromise, the country risks sliding back into conflict. Additionally, tensions on the Turkish border may ignite anew, especially if Ankara decides to confront Kurdish forces with renewed vigor. How the US and other global powers respond to these moves will be critical. The coming weeks and months will be decisive. Syria's people, who have endured years of suffering, deserve a chance at stability and peace. Whether the new era leads to inclusive governance and reconciliation, or once again collapses into turmoil, remains uncertain. All eyes are now on Syria, hoping for a better future.